So today we're going to talk about the 2001 film by Kiyoshi Kurosawa called Pulse. And I just recently watched his movie Cure, which came out in 1997, and I absolutely loved it. I loved it so much, I put it on my top 4 in Letterboxd right now. And he's a director that I hadn't really known a lot before, but I've learned a lot about him in the past week because of these two movies, and I can't wait to watch more from him because his movies, or from the two that I've seen, the themes that they tackle are done in such a methodical way and such a character driven. The performances or the arcs that the characters are going through are very much in their own heads, and the subtle like supernatural elements that he implements are just exactly what I love in movies, because both of the worlds are presented at the beginning very just matter of fact, rather realistic, and then especially in Pulse here, it devolves a lot into more horror, sci-fi, supernatural themes, but very subtly, and yeah, it was just masterfully done. So, yeah, the movie was released in 2001, so that is a few years after his movie Cure. And it also had the title in Japanese Cairo. Not sure what that meant actually, but yeah, so Kiyoshi Kurosawa, bit of background. He's not Akira Kurosawa. He's the I don't know if they're related at all, but they're both Japanese filmmakers and they are both masters at what they do. Honestly, because Akira Kurosawa's films are older, they're more outdated. That's just what happens with older media. I love the two Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I have to make sure I mention which one. The two Kiyoshi Kurosawa films that I've seen so far, and he's quickly going up to some of my top, or one of my top directors. So a few other movies that he's done that I have not seen. I have not seen Tokyo Sonata. I've not seen Creepy, Wife of a Spy, Journey to the Shore, Before We Vanish, To the Ends of the Earth, Doppelganger. He has quite an extensive filmography, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of his other ones. And also Retribution, which honestly I think I found him because I saw the poster for Retribution. It's like, oh, maybe it's like some cool crime thrillery thing, and then I went on and learned about Cure and Pulse and everything. So I do want to watch Retribution as well. I'm trying to find a way to find it. It's not on many streaming services, but I think that's the one I might watch next. That or Creepy. So back to Pulse. Pulse was screened at Cannes. It wasn't in the main competition, but it was one of the secondary competitions. I'm not sure the exact name of that. I looked it up on Wikipedia the other day and it completely blanked my mind and I forgot to write it down, but yeah, this movie, what I could find online, it grossed about $300,000. I'm sure the budget was likely more. And for a few Asian movies, it's been difficult to find the budget information. Maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. I guess a generic Google search or looking on IMDb or Wikipedia. Maybe I could do deeper research than that. But from what I've seen, I couldn't really find much from it. But alas, so now, beginning of the spoiler warning for Pulse. So if you haven't seen the movie and don't want to hear spoilers, leave now. But I really hope that people have seen this because it's going to be a great one to talk about. And yeah, I really loved it. So moving on to some of the characters in the movie, we have Kawashima, who is one of the main characters. There's two plot lines that are actually, you know what? I'm going to go from kind of just a rough rundown of the story before we're talking about the character. So the story begins on a boat, and it begins with a guy. The actor's name is Koji Yakusho, and he is the main character of Cure, and apparently he's a mainstay in some of Kiyoshi Kurosawa's films. And he's on a boat with one of the other characters, Michi, and they're kind of just chilling on the boat looking at the horizon. And it's a weird start to the movie. One of those kind of like cold opens, and then we get into kind of the actual film, or the actual main plot, and we'll come back to the boat later. But so the movie starts off, and we're at this greenhouse rooftop site, and a few people work there. We have Michi, we have who else do we have? We have Junko, and we have Yabe, who are kind of the three characters we're going to focus on in this plot. And so one of their coworkers, Taguchi, he has not shown up to work recently, and he's supposed to have provided a disc for something. And so one of them, I think it was Michi, who goes to check on him in his house. And at this point in the film, the horror kind of begins to subtly introduce itself through the very suspenseful interaction. He's being very weird in his house. And so she goes and she looks for the disc, and it's on his table, and he walks into another room. And then she's like, oh, okay, here it is. And he goes back and sees him. And just then, in the past 30 seconds, he hung himself. And so that's a weird start. And then she goes and notices that on his computer screen, it is displaying an image of him at his desk setup. But on the screen there, it shows the same image. So it's like an infinite loop of that image, which wouldn't make sense. Because you can't see if the image is being taken there. I guess you could Photoshop it. But this is the early days of technology. So, yeah, starting to kind of ooze in the technological creepiness, along with a guy just hanging himself out of nowhere. And so she breaks the news to everybody. They're distraught. And she also notices in the house that she goes back to look at she walks over. And in the camera shot, we're following her face as she walks over. And then we pan over, and it seems like in front of her eyes, he disappeared, and now there's just oil markings, black marks on the wall, kind of a shadow of where he used to be. And that image of the black marks where people used to be is some of the best imagery in this entire movie. I absolutely loved it. It's very much reminiscent of when you had, Pompeii, and you had people's kind of just markings, no traces of their bodies, but yeah, kind of just like black shadows, outlines of where the people actually used to be. So yeah, that was sick. I love that. And then she goes and tells all of her coworkers, yeah, this dude kind of just killed himself. And who was it? I think it was one of the other coworkers. I think his name was Yabe. On his phone, on his like old 2001 mobile phone, he gets a call, and it's somebody saying, help me. And then on his phone, he sees the same image that she saw at his house of his setup with him and the infinite loop of images. And I don't think he really knew what was going on at that point. So yeah, he sees that as well. And so he goes to investigate, and he sees the black stain on the wall and everything. And then he also finds a room in the apartment complex with red tape along all the edges. And in this room, he goes into it. And I don't think we see at that point what's in the room, but we learn later on that those red markings, the red tape on rooms, means that there's a little ghost in there. There's a little guy waiting to spook you. So it's not said yet, or I don't think they show the ghost there. So then he becomes the distant one at work. So now they were concerned about that one other guy, and now he's the guy that they should all be concerned about. So one of the other coworkers, the one who initially went to the house and saw the guy hang himself, she was walking home, and she just sees somebody jump off of like a factory silo and kill himself. She handled it very well. She kind of just turned away and was like fine at work later. But it's kind of starting to show in the movie that something weird is going on in the world, and it's not just these people. People are starting to be affected by these ghosts, but people aren't sure how yet. And yeah, I mean, that scene was brutal with the person jumping off the silo and killing himself. That was, I don't know, it was just, it worked very well at that point in the movie. And then after that, we have, what do we see? She finds that guy who is now becoming distant and everything. He went into the red marked room. She goes and talks to him, and they're talking at work because he hadn't gone to work in a couple days. He comes to work and he's just like super quiet and super rude to everybody. She goes and talks to him, and he talks about, I think, like being lonely or something like that. And in that room, it's always on like a plain wall. Same thing happens. He sits there, isolated, all by himself, and he turns into nothingness, and just his shadow is left on the wall again. So she's seen two people get dusted so far. So not having a great week for her. And then after that, I think I think it was like right after that. Her other coworker, her final coworker who's still alive, what's her face? Junko. She goes into a red marked room, of course, and then in there they actually meet up with a ghost. Yeah, there's she goes in there and she's learned at this point not to go in those rooms. Or the other girl, what's her face? Michi. I gotta remember these names. So Michi goes and finds Junko, who's went into one of the red rooms, and they're met face to face with a ghost. The ghost's hair blowing in the non-existent wind, and just facing them. Junko freaked out, and so they kind of just hang out at Junko's place for a while she kind of just rests and is going crazy. And so she then, of course, seeing a ghost, she goes crazy, and in her apartment again she gets dusted. Her shadow's on a wall. She turns to dust, or the shadow. She turns to the shadow, and then the shadow turns to dust. And that was a crazy scene because you have Michi, who's seen these other few people and is trying her hardest to reach out and save Junko, but these whole pandemic of people turning into like shadows and disappearing is all stemming from their own isolation. These ghosts, they come, they say, "Help me." They're feeling so alone. After life, death is just so lonely. And it's not something that we can rationalize and say, oh, because they say they're lonely, people know that death is going to be lonely, so they lose their will to live because they're so scared for that. It's just this thing where once they are exposed to that, it's like a pandemic. It's like a virus. And then they're just hit with a wave of isolation and loneliness, and then they vanish away as if they were never even there. Whoa. And so as she fades away, there's like this whole like windstorm inside the house where the wind comes in and blows all of her particles away, and then Michi's literally reaching out trying to grab all the dust particles of her old friend. And that's a good example of the horror that this director brings, where it's not like jump scare horror, but it's more this existential dread. Yeah, so after that, she tries to call her mom, who doesn't answer the phone. She's like, oh, I gotta go drive and find her. And then she drives, and then that is when the two storylines meet. So as that first storyline is going on, we also have a secondary storyline of just this economics student, and he has a new computer. He's like, oh, everybody's going on the web now. Gotta go on the web myself. So he has this new computer, and he tries to dial up the internet, and after he has an attempt, he like turns it off and everything, and then it seems like it dials itself up, and he sees this guy in a black mask with "Help Me" written in the back, and then he turns it off because he's freaked out. He goes, asks at the university or the school or whatever, this girl named Harue, and they strike up a friendship, and he tries to ask her help with what's happening with his computer. And so they meet up, they look at the computer, she gets like the information, and then they go back to the school, and then we're met with another guy. I forget his name. I'll just call him the other student. And he's the guy who made a program that is one of the visual metaphors of what's happening here. He made a program where it's kind of just like, imagine asteroids. You have just the black slate, and you have a bunch of asteroids. Ignore the spaceship. A bunch of similar sized, just glowing balls going throughout the screen. And whenever they meet with another glowing ball, they combined. And then they keep on going. But there's a glitch in it that they don't know why it's happening. Every so often, there's just a blip. A blip of like another ball outside of the existing balls. It's there for a second and then it's gone. It's a shadow. It's something that is there but isn't there. And it's very representative of the ghosts in this movie. It's very hard to dissect what that exact metaphor is. It could be representing of what the ghosts are doing to people, kind of with like if we're talking about a virus, the virus is swallowing up the people, kind of like viruses do. Or we could have all these people are going about their lonesome selves, and we're talking about loneliness with these little balls. And then when they meet another one, they are infused together. I don't know. I'm sure there's some deeper way of analyzing that, but I'm not sure. And so that student and the other guy, Kawashima, who has tried to dial up his internet, who's the newbie to the internet, they go to a library. And that scene was very weird because the guy explains to him that ghosts are real and they see a ghost together. They see one, and he says, why don't you go catch it? Nobody has been able to catch it, but if you go fast enough, you might be able to catch the ghost. A ghost that is just hiding between a bunch of bookshelves. And they both see it, so it's not just in one of their heads. It has to be there, because they're both acknowledging it. And so Kawashima goes and he tries to catch it, but as he turns for the bookcase, it's just not there anymore. And there's just something so creepy about that. Two people acknowledging the same thing is happening, the same supernatural phenomenon. And so as an audience, we're like, oh, okay, it's not something, one person isn't just going crazy. That would make sense if they both see it. And so I think that's why that scene works so well. And then after that experience, he looks for Harue, his one friend at the school. She's not there. He goes to her place and she's soaking wet. And she starts to be more isolated and starts to go crazy. Kind of, we see the patterns like we've seen with the other people in the other storyline. And she has sudden like epiphanies where she's like, is death gonna be lonely? Things like that. And so Kawashima says, okay, let's leave. Let's go on a subway and just see where it takes us. But then at a point, she has just a sudden desire to go home. And as he says to her, stay here. I'm going to go find the conductor, the driver, and we'll figure out a way to keep going. But she has a sudden urge to go home. She could choose going with Kawashima, but she chooses to go home. And I guess that's just, the virus has gotten to her already. And so after that, she goes home, and he eventually follows her after. But before he gets to her, there's another phenomenal scene where she goes home, and on her monitors, she has a bunch of monitors set up. She sees the same video that he saw with a dude in a black hat, or a plastic bag or something over his face. He takes it off, and then he shoots himself. And with like the help me in the background. And so I think in my mind, that's kind of just one of the first people who have seen these ghosts and have interacted with them. And who have been either, it seems like there's two paths that happens when you interact with the ghost. You either get dusted, you either turn into nothingness, or you kill yourself. You just have the sudden urge that your life has no meaning and you're super lonely. And so she sees that on a monitor, and then after, the monitor shows her own setup, as if there's an invisible camera in the background in another room. And so she goes to walk over to it. And we've seen physical ghosts at other points in this story, but at this point, she walks over to it, and she acknowledges it, but the audience can't see it. And that's another, like, subtly creepy moment that I really love. She acknowledges it. She looks at it, and she says, I think, I won't be lonely anymore, something like that. And she gives the invisible thing a hug. And then she's gone. She's gone from her house. So when Kawashima comes and looks for her, she's not there. And so he's just wandering the streets, and that's when he meets up with Michi, the two stories combined. And at that point, I don't know why they decide to go to the factory. Maybe they're like, oh, the factory is a place where spirits like to hang out, so let's go there. So they go to the factory, they find Harue. They just need an excuse to find Harue. And they find her, and of course he's like, oh, you're my only friend. Let's go. And she's gone crazy, of course. And she has a plastic bag on her head, just like the video. She takes it off, and just like the video, she shoots herself. And now she's gone. And so the other two, Michi and Kawashima, just like Harue was going to do with Kawashima, they're like, all right, let's get out of here. And so they're about to leave in her vehicle, but they need gas, of course. The classic. Car can't start. There's no gas. So Kawashima's like, okay, you stay here. I'm gonna go find some gas in the factory, which is one of the moments where it's like a typical horror movie moment. Oh, you stay here. Let's go split up and do this thing. Like, come on, man. So he goes back into the building, and as he's adjusting the cap of the gas canister, it rolls into a room that's marked with red tape. Of course. And of course he goes in there. That's one of the moments where it's like, why are you doing this, man? But maybe he thinks he can beat it. He really tries to beat it because he goes in there, he meets a physical ghost who keeps saying that death was extremely lonely. And he reaches out and he's trying to convince himself that it's not real, but he's able to physically touch him. And that's kind of the straw that breaks his back and kind of converts him to succumbing to whatever is happening. So as they're driving, he lasts for a bit though. He hangs on for a bit. They're driving, and the city just starts to crumble. Post-apocalyptic, full-on car or a plane crashes into a building. So they got on a boat and they drive away on the boat. But all this time now, Kawashima is now hit with this wave of loneliness and everything. So they find the boat. They find a bigger boat, like a freighter, and that's where the guy at the beginning of the movie is. And we see the same scene from the beginning of the movie, her looking off into the sunset, or not the sun, just the horizon. And then they say they're going to head to like Central America or something. They're getting like signals from there, so they're going to try to figure it out. And then the very last scene of the movie, Kawashima sitting in the boat in the bottom, and Michi's there too, and he fades away. And she's like, I found happiness with my last friend in the world. And that last line is confusing. Because we don't know who she's referencing as her last friend in the world. Oh, it looks like my stream is not happy right now. I think my internet might be a little poopy at the moment. Give me 1 second. I don't know what's happening. Okay, it's back. It's back. Dropped a few frames there, but we're good. Okay. What was I talking about? I was talking about how the last line of the movie, Michi says, I found happiness with my last friend in the world. Which is hard to dissect because, thinking about it now, initially, you're meant to think maybe it's Kawashima. They've come this far and they've tried to resist what's happening for so long. But all these people, they're suffering with their loneliness. That's kind of the virus that's these ghosts are bringing about. People see these ghosts. The ghosts aren't trying to be hostile or anything. The ghosts appear. The people meet with them, notice them, and then some unspoken message is told to these people that death is eternal loneliness. Something like that. And so people lose the will to live. They realize that, okay, what's the point? Is there life after death? They just get super existential, and then they leave without a trace. They get dusted, as I say. And so her last line, I think now, thinking about it, is she's one of the people who I guess wasn't really too exposed to technology. And she has been pushing to survive this whole thing, reaching out to people, trying to help people through their tough times. And she says she's found happiness with her only friend in the world. And I think that she's talking about herself. All these people, this loneliness gets to their mind and makes them super depressed. But loneliness and the depression don't have to be two things that are together. And I think she's the only one in this who understands that at the end, where she says that she's found happiness with her only friend, referencing herself. And because she's found that, she's able to survive it. Which makes sense, but just in general, the way that these ghosts go about, trying to think about it logically, you can find a few threads, right? It's like a lot of the discourse around this movie is about how the internet is creating isolation. The context of Japan in 2001 internet has just become this huge thing, and people are more and more staying in their houses, being more lonely, and just keeping to themselves. And so this could be a commentary on kind of just ahead of its time commentary on internet making people lonely. This form of connection that they think that they're making on the internet isn't physical, real connection. It's the illusion of connection, which some people could be good enough. It's kind of like when you're watching a movie and you have these two people, maybe they have a relationship and you're very invested in it. That's not a real relationship for you. Just as this connection online isn't real connection. It could lead to real connection, but it's not real connection in itself. And so if we're thinking about this isolation due to technology as a pandemic that's happening through these ghosts, I think that's kind of where it can be more logically explained. You have these ghosts who aren't hostile. I think at a point in the movie they're like, oh, there's somebody made a theory where it's like, oh, in the afterlife is getting so full that they're spilling into our world, something like that. And it kind of seems like these ghosts themselves are searching for friends. They just want to have friends. But when they get, or not for friends, for somebody to help them, they're reaching out for help because they're often saying, help me. And so they're just looking for help themselves. But in them searching out for help, it's giving these unspoken messages and just these ideas about death and the afterlife to these people that make them lose the will to live. So they're unknowingly the carrier of a virus that makes people lose the will to live. And that's pretty tragic if you think about it. These ghosts who are dead already, looking for help, looking to feel more alive, accidentally just making these people themselves lose the will to live. Yikes. And also some of the discourse, I guess it wasn't like super clear in the movie because a lot of the ghosts in this movie are just like in around the world, but there also are a lot that are in technology. So it could be like, I was thinking of it in a way where it feels very like Cronenbergian, where it's like if you're in, what's the word I'm looking for? Integrating. When you're fading away, you're integrating yourself. You're kind of immortalizing yourself by integrating yourself as a part of the internet. Where it's like, okay, I know that if death is eternal loneliness, if I put myself as a part of the internet, I'll live forever. But it's not real human person anymore, so they're just dusted and they're gone. That could be a way of thinking about it. But alas, there's so many different ways of thinking about it, and I think the ambiguity just is one of the reasons why Kurosawa is a master at what he does. And I really love the ambiguity because a lot of the times the feeling that it gives is more important than thinking about it logically, which is, I think, a very true statement for a lot of film, and I think he does it better than a lot of other directors that I've seen. So yeah, I think, yeah, man, this movie made me think a lot. It was super creepy at points. There's some scenes that a lot of people cite as being very scary, like the scene where, I forget which character it was. I think it was the guy coworker. What's his face? His name was Yabe. Yeah, Yabe. So Yabe, he first sees the red taped room in the apartment complex. He goes in, and then there's this weird hallway with a couch, and then he sees a ghost, a girl, in under a stairwell, and she's kind of like hidden in the shadows. And when she walks out, she kind of does this weird, like, she starts walking slowly, and then she does this weird dip with her body, which is, yeah, it was very creepy. And it was a weird introduction to the ghost, because at that point, I think it actually, I take that back. It's a very good introduction to, because at that point you're not sure if these ghosts are ghosts or humans or what they are. And so there's just something slightly off about this human presenting figure that just makes it super creepy. It's the introduction to the red tape rooms. And yeah, it was great. I love that scene. I love that scene. I love the scene where Haruwe hugs the invisible ghost that we can't actually see, because I think it's also very meta in the way that we're talking about all this technology and these ghosts that are looking upon these people while we are in ourselves, not interacting with other people. We are looking at a screen, watching these events play out. And we ourselves could just be the ghosts that are watching these stories unfold. And I guess that's just, yeah, commentary on the digital era. You all could, anybody watching this is, in this movie terms, the ghost just watching me right here. You guys, for the time being, have integrated yourselves as a part of the internet, taken away from your physical self and been invested in this world. Because I think, yeah, the relationship between like people and the internet world, it feels like the internet in general is just like a space that is like, all we're doing is moving our fingers, touching keys, moving mouse, but it feels like such a tactile interface that it feels like another world, where when you're actually using technology, it feels very much, you know, this, there's certain signs, certain cues that you've learned, but all you're doing is moving your finger. So it is kind of just like, yeah, you're integrating yourself whenever you're using technology. That's the way I'm thinking about it. I enjoy thinking about it that way, because I do think that this movie touches upon things where this technology has made people more isolated. And I think in general, if we're thinking about it in the context of the world, because of course this was made in 2001, that pandemic definitely has won, and that the way of life of going before technology is never coming back, at least in the areas where a lot of people are, especially here where I live in Canada. Because I guess I was raised in the 2000s, and at that point, my days as an elementary school kid, maybe I'll play video games, but a lot of the times it's like the family, everybody isn't on their devices 24/7. You'll hang out in a communal area. I kind of talked about it with Shoplifters a bit last week, where it's that nostalgic feeling that's just never going to happen again. And these people are connecting because each other is all they have. And yeah, I think that pandemic has taken over. And it's just a very interesting movie to think about with the current lens, with a modern lens, which is, yeah, a reason why it works so well. Because I wonder something that's never going to happen. Going back to 2001 and seeing this movie, how deep would people have thought about it? How much was the filmmaker intentionally commenting on the isolation and predicting what was going to happen? It's just something of the time that we'll never experience. Maybe there is writing on it. That would be cool if there was. There probably are reviews about it back then, which would be definitely cool to look up. But yeah, I love the movie. It was great. And I think I was just talking about the kind of meta-ness of this movie. And it also does a subtle thing, which I dig, and it gets less noticeable throughout the film because we're kind of integrating into the film, that it has these glitches in the film. And I guess it was definitely notable in the highway scene, where we have the invisible POV of whatever ghost is there, and her face is kind of glitching everywhere. The frame isn't static, it's kind of glitching to the left and up and down, whatever. And you have a bunch of that at the beginning. There's a lot of glitches, the glitchy effect. And so that, I'm trying to think of what that could mean, because I think when it's telling the audience that this itself, you're watching this on technology. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, there's a word that everybody uses where it's like, you're, get rid of your what's the word I'm looking for? We talked about it in film school so much. Your investment in a movie. Shoot, I'm blanking. So when it makes the audience aware of its own artifice, and it's saying to the audience, this is a movie, this is on a screen, it's glitching, this isn't real life, and so that could take people's investment in the story as a reality out of it and make us reflect on what we're watching and saying to us, hey, you're watching something right now, you're not interacting with real people. It could be saying that. Also, I think that it does provide part of the creep factor, because we are seeing these characters who are having these same experiences going on screens, and the screens glitching, seeing ghosts on the screens, things like that. And so it could be kind of trying to extend that creepiness to real life, which is cool. Cool way of doing that. Oh yeah, I remember there was another scene where it was, I think Haruwe saw the video at some point. I think somebody else might have, but it was like she's scrolling through this like database of just people, isolated people, which is very creepy in itself. So she scrolls through these, and there's this one of this guy who just walks back and forth, a little glitchy, and at points his body just disappears, like fluidly, moments at a time, and then comes back. And man, that's just such a good representation of a ghost in a movie. Yeah, I loved this movie. I think that's where I'm gonna end it off here. But yeah, Pulse, Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. Of course, Letterboxd, as I always say, is just that's just a score. It really doesn't matter that much. More talking about it, but I think I really loved just the ambiguity of this movie. I love when the feeling of a movie is more overwhelming than just thinking about it logically. And yeah, the subtle supernatural elements with a movie that started in basing in reality, a commentary about something, and then using this technology in a subtly creepy way. Oh, it just comes together so well. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why, but again, it's just the feeling that it gives. And yeah, another masterpiece that I've seen from Mr. Kiyoshi Kurosawa. If I could, I could, I guess, because this is just my channel. I would choose another Kiyoshi Kurosawa film because I know I'm going to watch one within the week, but I think I do want to switch it up a bit. I did say earlier that I watched a movie called, here, let me go back a bit. Actually, Diary, called Time Crimes, which is a time loop movie that I really, really enjoyed, and it was very fun to watch with a few friends. And I think I'm going to choose another time loop movie. That is also a subgenre that I enjoy. And so I found a movie, it was called Mirage on Netflix. And so I think that is what I'm going to choose for next week. I don't know what to expect. It is a Netflix movie. Oh, because I was talking about it, it came front and center on my Netflix recommended. So technology is listening to us. But yeah, I don't know what to expect. I think it's from another Spanish director, and the director of Time Crimes was Spanish as well. So I don't know if it's English or French. I see that there's subtitles here, so it might just in French. What am I saying? Spanish. So I think it might be in Spanish as well. Yeah, it says Spanish here. So, but yeah, I'm gonna choose this one again. What am I saying? This one, another Spanish time loop movie. I don't want to see too much. I don't want to watch this. Just stop showing me the trailer. Stop it. Okay, I'm just gonna look up Mirage Letterboxd instead. I don't want to see trailers before I see the movie. Okay. But this is a movie. It is a 3.5 on Letterboxd, which is pretty good. It is a Netflix movie, which I've never heard of it before. Oh yeah, see, I see now that the title is in Spanish. So I don't know what to expect. Yeah, I hate the Netflix autoplay as well, but this is next week, so a lot of people can watch this one. It's a time loop movie, which could be a lot of fun. Time crimes. It's a Spanish time loop movie, or time travel. I don't know exactly, but hey, that's what I'm choosing this time. So, yeah, Mirage for next week. What is next week? Next week, I believe, is the 30th. Yeah, 30th. Next week, the 30th, we'll do Mirage.